So I'm going to minimize myself. I'm not going to talk anymore unless I'm spoken to. And I'll let you take it away, Nick. So thanks for that.
Thank you very much, Jamie, for that lovely introduction. Now, actually, the first time me and Jamie met, well, it wasn't the first time we met, but the first time we really kind of connected was in Palestine. Do you remember that, Jamie?
Absolutely. This is why I find your project incredibly meaningful, because I think that was your first trip to Palestine, wasn't it?
It was. It was both. That was mine too. Yours as well. Yeah.
Yes.
And that was, we were both speaking at a brilliant conference in Bethlehem, and and that's really where this whole thing started, with that conference, and just going there and I mean, there's a kind of, Palestine's quite an exciting place, isn't it? I mean, it's got something special. People are special, kids are special, and it's got a special approach to learning English. And I got quite excited about it. Now, normally, when you do a talk, when I do a webinar or I do a talk at a conference, you know, you normally put in your proposal about what you'd like to talk about. This time I didn't have that luxury. Jamie just told me what my title was for the webinar. So actually, I think that's a really good idea, Jamie. And so I'm really just going to talk. You've called the session Stories from the Hub. Stories from the Hands Up Project. So I'm really just going to tell some stories. I've got some slides and they're pictures. All the slides are pictures and they all tell a different story about some aspect of the Hands Up Project. So not long after me and Jamie met in Palestine, I got invited to go back to do storytelling. And this was kind of a tour of that part of the world. It was working in Palestine, and it was working with working in Jordan and Egypt and Lebanon as well. And I was doing a British Council course called Kids Read. Well, it's not really a course, it was a sort of storytelling project. And one of the places I went to was Zaatari refugee camp, which you can see in the picture there. And I was invited by the British Council to go and do some storytelling with big groups of kids. And I took along some of my favourite picture books. They told me I was going to be working with quite young kids. And I took along books like, one of the books I took along was We're Going on a Bear Hunt. Anyone know that story? By Michael Rosen. It's a fantastic physical, rhythmic story. And I was sort of thrown into a room and there were about 50, 60 kids crammed into the room with me, as well as masses of teachers and support people from the British Council. And I was kind of expecting that everyone would be sitting calmly, listening to me telling the story. But I noticed two things immediately. Well, one was, as soon as I started telling the story, everyone pretty much got up and started doing the actions with the story. It's a very physical story. It's got lots of, if you don't know it, it's got things like, we're going on a bear hunt, we're gonna catch a big one. What a beautiful day. I'm not scared. Uh-oh. Mud. Thick, oozy mud. We can't go over it. We can't go under it. Oh no! We've got to go through it. Squelch, squirch, squelch, squirch, squelch, squirch. So it's that kind of story. It's got a lot of physicality in it, a lot of gestures, and a lot of really nice rhythmic language. And I suppose it's natural that immediately all the kids started getting up. I mean, you can see in that picture there's one boy right next to me telling the story with me. So that's one of the things I noticed, that it's a very people are very physical in this part of the world. Maybe young kids are everywhere. I don't know. The other thing I noticed was that while I was telling the story in English, and after every line, one of the boys said in a very clear, loud storytelling voice, everything I said, he translated it into Arabic. He said it in a really beautiful voice, and I thought, wow, this is great. Here's someone who knows English really well, and he's just translating it for everyone else. I mean, I was kind of thinking, oh, maybe they're not listening to the story in English, but I was kind of pleased that there was somebody who knew English that well that he could translate it. And then I spoke to Haya, I think her name was, the support person from the British Council who'd gone with me to Zaatari refugee camp. And I said, wow, that's amazing. He's got a really good level of English to be able to translate what I was saying into Arabic. And she said, oh, no, he wasn't translating it. He was just looking at the pictures and looking at your actions and just telling his own story. He was just literally just coming out with anything, just creating a story or translating what he thought I was saying into Arabic, but he didn't really speak English at all. And it sort of made me think, wow, that's amazing, isn't it? That kind of, I mean, maybe it isn't something that's particular about that part of the world. Maybe it's something about everywhere. That there is a kind of creativity, and that we are all people who have ability to tell stories. We're all creative people. And I think certainly Palestine is, and these are Syrian kids, by the way, in Zaatari, or that part of the world is very much a culture which values story very much. And the other thing that this kind of made me think a lot about was how, since this moment, I'd say I've started to become very skeptical about the whole kind of communicative approach. And this idea of that we use language and that we should teach language as communication, and that we do lots of activities in our classes where we get students working in pairs and where we get them doing sort of safe activities. We don't want to put any pressure on learners. We don't want to make them perform. We want them to feel safe and secure, and we want to maximize how much time they get using English. And I feel very skeptical about that idea now. I mean, I can see there's a lot of value in it, but I can also see there's a lot of value in a kind of performance-based approach to language learning. One of the things I notice about Palestine is that kids or teachers organize classrooms so that there's a lot of performance in the class. So they do a lot of, rather than closed pair work where students are working together in pairs, they do a lot of activities where they do open pair work. So they'll say, right, you two students stand up and do the dialogue in front of the whole class. The other thing that's interesting is often students will get a round of applause when they say something in English. And the teacher will actually encourage people to give them a round of applause. One of the first things I learned in Arabic was Sagfulha, Sagfulha, which means give her a clap. Give her a clap, because it was such a common thing that, when students produce language, they were invited, the rest of the class were invited to give a round of applause. And I thought that's really interesting, because it didn't seem to me like learners were struggling by being asked to perform. It didn't seem to me like students felt shy about doing that. Now, of course, you could say, well, the teachers are only picking the stronger students, the more confident students to do that. I'm not sure. I don't think that is the case. Now, so I went back to the UK and I thought, how can we do something to work with all these kids who are so interested in story? And we've also got teachers who are very good storytellers in Palestine and and who see storytelling as a kind of performance that happens in the classroom. And so I was kind of thinking, how could we develop this? And this is how the Hands Up project started. So I started working with a group of kids in a library in Gaza. And it started with me just telling stories to these kids. And I used a platform kind of similar to this one, which is called Zoom. It's a free platform to use. And I'd connect to the kids and tell them stories. And again, I've noticed that same kind of thing, that kids would be part of the story. Even though we were doing the stories remotely, kids were still kind of coming right up to the webcam, almost fighting to get close to the webcam to be part of the story. And so I kind of, I think in a way we have developed a kind of Hands Up project methodology. And I think at its heart, it has storytelling, but it also has performance at its heart. So sometimes we're working with big groups of kids, maybe 30, 40, 50 students in a room. Now, the good thing might be that we're performing, when we're telling a story through the medium like this, they can see us on a big screen, they can see our faces, and that's really useful for storytelling. And especially if we look right into the webcam, the kids can feel like they're really connecting to somebody. Perhaps even more so than in a big room with lots of students when you're actually face to face. And so we also do a lot of things where we get 2 or 3 kids up to the webcam and we interact with them and we talk to them about the story, or we maybe get them to draw pictures of a particular moment that they liked in the story, and they come and hold their pictures up to the webcam and show them. And of course we have to vary who's at the webcam quite a bit, but I think it's a very rich experience for those kids. And also this is where the name, the Hands Up project, came from. Because I noticed that so many times there'd be, we'd say, is there a volunteer who'd like to come forward and speak? Anyone would like to come and talk about the story, or who would like to come and show their picture? And everybody is me. Everyone's there, putting themselves forward. And that is, as a teacher of young learners, I'm sure Jamie feels the same. I'm sure lots of you feel the same. That is an absolute life-giving force for us as teachers. There's nothing worse than going into a group and say, and is there anyone who'd like to do this? And silence. It's very rare to get that with Palestinian kids. They are all desperate to put themselves there and to make a connection, and that's very beautiful, and that's kind of what keeps me going.